So, for the past 6 years, I have been engaged in, I guess, what you could call a Cold War of a sort with old school RuneScape's most pointless boss, Obor the Hill Giant. So, for those of you who don't know, he's a big guy, he looks like this, he swings a club at you, he is one of the most mechanically simple bosses in the game and one of the lowest level and easiest to fight bosses in the game, aside from Brutus the Bull, which was recently released. And I would say that he is also easily the most pointless boss in the game, because he only drops one unique item, and that one unique item is so situational that it's basically only really useful for free-to-play players, and has basically no point, no real value as a member. This is also made weirder or worse by the fact that he is not easy to fight. He takes a really long time to grind out. This is not because his drop rates are low, but because there is the mechanic of getting to him where you have to be able to acquire keys first to be able to fight the boss. So there are these giant keys, and these giant keys drop from other hill giants at a low rate, and then once you have one of those keys, you can go in and fight him. The way it actually used to work, and the way it worked when this Cold War of mine started, is that you needed the key to be able to fight him, so each key equals one fight. They later changed it so that now you can fight him without the keys, but you need the key to open a chest afterwards. And so most of his rewards were then moved to that chest. And so the question is, does that actually help? The answer is not really at all. I was kind of excited when this change originally happened, because I thought maybe it would mean that this grind would be getting eliminated or reduced significantly, but that is not really the case. So basically they made it so that you can fight him without having the key first, and he has a relatively high drop rate for dropping the keys himself. However, this requires a surprising amount of effort, because the reality is that while you can fight him to get the keys, and he has a reasonably high drop rate compared to everything else, he also does not reset easily between fights. So when you fight Obor and you kill him, it will not reset, and you'll not get to fight him again until one of two things happens, from my understanding. You have to either open the chest with a key, or you have to leave and come back. Well, obviously, you can't just open the chest with a key if you don't have one, and leaving and coming back is a relatively tedious thing that takes a bunch of time and attention. So that makes the whole thing relatively time intensive and very active, and it's like, well, like, the fight itself is zero effort, so it's kind of annoying that you have to, like, leave and come back after every time you do the fight, and it's generally a lot easier to get the keys from just the normal hill giants. So while this was initially framed as something that would make it easier to greenlog your Obor, it didn't really do that at all, and the reality is that it's basically just the same as it was, but weirdly slightly different. So, in reality, the best way to get keys, previously and still, is to fight hill giants and get them to drop them. They have a relatively low rate at 1 in 128, but luckily hill giants are not a very strong enemy, so they are very easily farmed. So that kind of gets to how this became my great obsession over the past 6 years, and why I've been in this Cold War with Obor. And the reason for this is quite simple. It is that I'm very stupid. So when I started playing old school RuneScape in 2020, that was because I really last had played the game around 2005 or something like that, and so I had just not played in many years, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And so one thing that happened is that when I started training my combat, I had a vague memory of how I had done it before, how I had done it back when I was a teenager, when I was a little kid, which is that I had basically fought a lot of hill giants in the Edgeville dungeon. So hill giants in the Edgeville dungeon, from my memory, were a good training method at the time, because they dropped big bones, which gave a good amount of prayer experience, and I believe at the time that maybe it was just bones and big bones, or there just wasn't a lot of different kinds of bones, so this was actually a pretty good way to train your prayer, was by fighting the hill giants and burying the bones, in addition to obviously training your combat. And so back when I played, when I was a kid, this had been a really popular method that a lot of people had been camping, and so you'd often have to hop worlds or, you know, basically, like, there'd be, like, one person stuck on every hill giant spawn in the Edgeville dungeon, and so you would just sit there and wait for the next one to spawn instead of, you know, fighting a bunch of them. Well, I did that for a while. A really embarrassingly long time, because I just didn't know any better. I had just come back to the game after many years off. I was not really looking at guides, I did not really know what I was doing, so I just kind of was like, okay, well, I'm going to get started, I'm going to train my combat a bit, I'm going to do hill giants for a while, because sure, why not? And so I did hill giants for what was actually a very long period of time. So remember how I said that the drop rate for the giant keys is 1 in 128? Well, I got like over 100 of them. I got like 120 of them, something like that. Which means that I probably killed somewhere in the vicinity of 15,000 hill giants. You know, with like, I don't know, like a rune sword or something. Like, I had no equipment, I didn't know what I was doing, and, you know, if I had been a lot smarter about things, I probably would have gotten on Slayer sooner, or I would have done a lot of other different training methods rather than just banging my head on hill giants for what seemed like months. But I did it, and I didn't know what the keys did at first, because I would see they were dropping these keys, and I was like, well, I don't know what these do, because obviously they had not been in the game the last time I had played. But I was like, okay, well, I'll collect these things, and sure enough, you know, I'll be able to use them later. Well, you know, I had 120 keys or so, and I was like, okay, I'm going to figure out what those do, and that's how I discovered Obor and the entire mechanics around that. And I said, okay, well, great, I'm going to use all these keys now. So Obor's unique item, the Hill Giant Club, has a 1 in 118 drop chance, which means surely I figured I must be able to get it within that number of keys. Surely I had killed 15,000 hill giants, surely that was enough to get this item off of this boss. And amusingly, there is another similar boss with a very similar mechanic, which is Bryophyta. Bryophyta is a very similar boss because she is like a moss giant boss, and similarly, she has keys that drop from moss giants, and then you fight her, and then she has a unique item that you can get that has a relatively similar drop rate. The difference here is that her item is actually kind of useful. So the nature staff that she drops is very useful in saving nature runes if you're doing a lot of high alchemy, and so it does actually have a use value, even if it is a rather niche one, unlike Obor. That said, I had a extreme streak of luck when I fought Bryophyta. I only had like 10 moss giant keys or something like that, but I managed to get her item within 6 kills, just 6 kills. So it was like, okay, I got so lucky on fighting her, and I got extremely cursed when it came to fighting Obor. So I wasted all of my 120 or so keys, and I did not get the drop. And so this caused me an irrational amount of hatred. I was like, I need to greenlog this guy. However, at the same time, I also recognized that killing a lot of hill giants manually is a huge pain, and that surely there are better ways to do it. And the answer is yes, it is to burn through a lot of cannonballs using the cannon to farm a lot of hill giants. So I said to myself, okay, that's great. I'm going to come back when I have some money to spare. And so this turned into a probably 5 or so year, I guess, rivalry, hatred, whatever, with this guy who's just a bundle of pixels, where I was always like, okay, when I have some cash to spare, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna knock you out. And so that is what I finally decided to do a few weeks ago. I did look into the research on the best way to farm these hill giant keys, and thankfully I did run into somebody who had done the research and was able to share the best methods. So, a really good one is the Giant's Den south of the DJR Fairy Rink. That is the Fire Chasm on Corrend, and it's a really good method. It, you know, basically has a crap ton of giants all in one spot, and you can just place a cannon, and while it's obviously not multi-way combat, it is a very quick way to mow through a lot of giants at once, and this gives you around 7 keys per hour. You can also get a bit better than that if you are farming Obor himself using the method that I was mentioning earlier of just fighting him. But that means, again, it's very tedious to me, it's very active, it does save you a lot of money. So obviously the method of using the giant stand will blow through a lot of cash because you are basically just burning cannonballs at a very high rate. Now, of course, the best option, provided that you're willing to do it, is to do the Deep Wilderness Dungeon. So the Deep Wilderness Dungeon has a much better drop rate because now your drop rate is 1 in 64 instead of 1 in 128. Obviously, you are risking quite a bit if you are hanging out there in the wilderness. The nearest escape point is to go to the mage arena, so it's actually not too far off, and basically, so long as you bank pretty regularly, I mean, you're probably not going to see a ton of PKers coming after you. I really only had to deal with one the entire time of doing this, though I was also making sure that I was idling this during times that a lot of people are not playing. But there is always that risk. This method obviously is also going to be a lot cheaper. You're going to burn through a lot fewer cannonballs because again, it takes half as many kills on average to get the same number of keys. So just make sure that you're cautious, make sure that you bring the right stuff and so on. I would also highly recommend that if you're going to do this grind as a sort of idle grind, that you configure some plugins to get the best possible experience. So in particular, for the ground items plugin, you want to make sure that you have the giant keys highlighted so that they will pop up with a nice purple color and a highlight and all of that. Makes them easier to see. And I also recommend that you configure Watchdog so that you have a notification that goes off whenever a key drops based on that highlighted item drop. That will enable you to have a much easier time. Anytime a key pops up, great, you get a very audible, obvious notification. You can grab it off the floor and you can continue on your way. So this can be a very idle approach. Now that said, you would think, again, that hopefully I would not have to spend that many more keys to get this club. Because at the end of the day, I had already spent like 120 keys. I had already gotten like 120 kills. That did not happen to be the case. So I was cursed again and again. I had to keep fighting this asshole forever and ever. And ultimately, it took me like a whole week of grinding this. I also looked through and I spent a little over 10 million on cannonballs alone. You'll see here that I burned through a few stack of cannonballs that I bought on the Grand Exchange, and I also burnt through another stack of around 7,500 or maybe closer to 10,000 cannonballs that I had before I started buying more. So I burnt through a crap ton of cannonballs. I burnt through 10 million in cash just to get this stupid club, which is barely worth anything at all, just so I could greenlog this asshole that I have hated for the past 6 years. And in the end, I had to go 275 kills to get this club, which is obviously over 2x drop rate. I should also say that Obor is obviously not a boss that a lot of people farm, specifically because of how annoying it is to farm these keys in order to fight him. And also, of course, simply because there's basically no reward for it, and, it's like mostly just a waste of time. Which is crazy, because it means that getting 275 kills going dry on Obor means that I am now ranked 1,176th in the boss rankings for Obor. That is better than every other boss that I have ever fought. That is better than the time that I spent months farming Wintertoad to get my Phoenix pet, and most likely that record will still hold, because no matter how many times you fight many of the more commonly fought bosses, people will be fighting them a lot more than they will fight Obor, simply because Obor is not interesting. Obor is not worth fighting. And I only did this because I sunk cost fallacied my way into hating this guy so much that I decided that I had to go on a crusade to finally kill him and finally get this club. Of course, if you go to the high end of the Obor rankings, it's very clear that there are some people with insane levels of mental illness who would have killed at this point somewhere between like 1 million and 2 million hill giants just to get the keys to get rank 1. Why would you do this? Why would anybody do this? I don't know. This also includes some rather funny ones, like rank 1 Obor, who with 7,855 kills is actually ranked 3rd, so he's no longer first rank. Allowed himself to slip, I guess. We have was rank 1 Obor at rank 16 with 2,649 kills, And we have I Fight Giants at rank 21 with 2,277 kills. So, obviously, there are some people who are more insane than me, who hate this guy more than me, and who feel more compelled to get those kills. But I will say that obviously I do not feel like I have accomplished anything after I am done with all of this. Again, it is a stupid club that has basically no use value when you are a member. So at the end of the day, I basically just sunk cost fallacied my way into a kind of, I don't know, long-standing feud where I just really was set on getting this club and finally being able to say I was done with the guy. So, have I learned anything? Absolutely not. I have learned no lessons. I am going to continue playing old school RuneScape, and things are going to continue as they are. But I hope that this story has been of some interest to you in some tiny little way. So, that is all for today's video. As always, don't hesitate to like, comment, subscribe, smash the notification bell. Send any hate comments down below. Tell me how much you hate Smooth Obor, terrible guy. Whatever the case is. Have a good one. I will talk to you all next week.